Hey guys, welcome back to JD Mods. If you are a subscriber to the channel, you will know that this is my 2002 Honda Civic hatchback, better known as the EP3 model. Now basically I'm going to be turbocharging this car very shortly, but before you turbocharge any car, it's a good idea to make sure that everything is working 100%, because increasing horsepower by turbocharging, supercharging, or doing any mods to your car will basically exaggerate any small issue that it currently has. And currently this car has a small issue in which when I'm driving and come to a stop usually, there is a very hot oil smell. It's not burning any out the tailpipe, and I never see any on the driveway or wherever I just parked. So basically in today's video I'm going to show you how to fix this problem. This of course will work with this car, but pretty much any Honda or pretty much any other car that has an engine in it. First, let's pop the hood and take a look at what the issue is. So here's my motor. This here is a K24A2 out of a 2005 TSX actually. Basically it is just a Honda 2-liter inline 4-cylinder powering my front two tires. And basically the issue we have is that the valve cover gasket is not properly sealing. Now this can happen on various motors of all makes and models, but on the Honda K20 and K20 variants such as this K24, this is a very common issue, I believe, because it happened to my girlfriend's RSX as well, and I've heard about it a lot online. Now basically the valve cover is just the piece that goes in between this part here and the head of your car. There's a rubber gasket that goes in a ridge all around the perimeter of the valve cover. There's also, where all the bolts go through the valve cover, a rubber grommet, and of course there's your oil filler and your oil dipstick that can also leak. Now as you can see here, mine is clearly leaking. I did just clean it recently, so it may not be a great indication, but right here under this bolt there is usually a line of oil. You can also see the oil up here coming from the oil fill, so I'm gonna have to get a new one of those. And then down here in the corner, there's a lot of places like this. It's kind of hard to see, but basically the gasket will leak and the oil will come out of that, touching even the hot intake and producing that smell, and of course you lose your valuable engine oil. Also in the back, you can see my headers there. The oil can drip even close to those headers and smoke if it's serious, or just smell really hot, which is what happens with my car. So in today's video we're going to go ahead and be changing that gasket. So the first step is to take off your old valve cover. Now aside from the bolt itself, most valve covers will have a lot of stuff attached to it. As you can see, mine has a crankcase ventilation going to the intake. It has a bracket for my throttle cable. It has a ground going to my fuel rail harness, a spark plug cover, and the wiring harness going into my coil packs. So I interrupt this time lapse for a very important message. Basically, first of all, I just got off the cover, and what I did was unplugged the coil pack and then pulled the coil pack out, then plugged it back into its harness and just set it aside. This way you don't get them mixed up. Doesn't matter on this motor, but if it does, then you know there's going to be no issues. But look what I found once I removed the cover. These are the grommets and washers I was telling you about. There's one there. And I really hope you guys can see this, but there's this one right here at the back that is literally not even tightened down. There it is right there. It's like probably 5 to 10 millimeters off of the valve cover, and then you can see the oil that has just completely poured down this little valley right here, right onto the manifold. Like I could literally, it's wet. So maybe just take this as a little lesson from me, that before you even buy a valve cover gasket, go around and check and make sure all the bolts are tight, even ones hiding under spark plug covers. So there we have the valve cover ready to be removed, but the thing is that it's quite dirty with sand and dust and stuff. And just underneath this valve cover are your camshafts, which are very tight tolerances. So what I'm going to try and do is take it off as gently as possible, going straight up and making sure none of the sand rubs off on a line and falls into my camshafts. So let's go ahead and do that now, and then we will replace the gasket. So you can now see that the gasket has been removed, and as I mentioned, there is just a ton of sand. You probably can't see it, but if I just run my finger along the bottom, there's just a quick example. Now, along with sand, you're also going to have a bit of gasket maker from the last installation of this. So I have a razor blade here. This one's pretty big. You can definitely use one smaller or a legit gasket scraper. And I'm going to go ahead and first, using a rag, just clean off all the sand for precautionary reasons. And then using the gasket scraper, going to scrape off all of the old FIPG into the engine bay, not into the engine. Just be very careful of that. And let's try and do this quickly before any pine needles from the trees fall onto your camshafts here. There it is, the final super clean head mating surface. As you can see, there's that little ridge right there, and it is all perfectly clean of oil, dirt, and old gasket maker. I made sure to go all around the whole thing, and then made sure my camshafts were free of dirt, pine needles, etc. Also a good time to make sure all the lobes on your camshaft aren't going, and mine look to be perfectly smooth. This is a very low kilometer motor, so that's kind of expected. Now let's go ahead and install the new gasket. So before installing the valve cover, we're going to go ahead and change out the spark plug gaskets, and I've tried many different ways off camera and found out that the best method requires a wrench. I got a 14 mil here, not really sure if it matters, and then using just one of the forks on the wrench, you place it just under where the gasket sits. It makes this perfect angle pretty much. Then by pushing down on it with a bit of force, these are surprisingly stuck in there. Your gasket just pulls up, and then you can continue using the wrench or switch to a screwdriver if you have one. But there it is. Basically, these are so hard to take out because they're enforced with some metal coils. Like, I can't even bend that with my fingers. Let's go ahead and take those all out using the same method. Now, to go ahead and install the new ones, make sure they will be facing the correct way up, which on this version is when the skirt is facing upwards. Now go ahead and just borrow any oil sitting on your valve cover, lube it up a little bit, place it over the hole, then go ahead and push it in. If you have a mallet, it'll probably help, but you might be able to get it with your fingers as well. There's all four of mine in. I just tapped them in. Now, before reinstalling, it's a good time to use a rag, such as this used sock I have here. And I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the valve cover. And also, if you're going to be flipping it over, make sure to flip it over onto something soft like this piece of cardboard I put down. And then we're going to go and put it back on the car. There's the valve cover all prepped to go back on. I cleaned her all up and inserted the new valve cover gasket, making sure it's in the proper orientation, and just run your fingers along it to make sure it's properly seated. Now let's go ahead and work on the motor. So this is probably one of the trickiest parts, as this is not a very tricky project. But basically, on your head there'll be some spots, such as right in here, where the main block meets like a timing chain cover, which is this guy right over here. As you can see, there's a crease. And basically that is a spot that would be prone to leaking oil. So to fix that, we have this Permatex The Right Stuff. Now, of course, I'm not sponsored. This is just by far the best one to use. There's tons of black oil resistant gaskets, but this one here, as you can see, it says 1 minute gasket. So basically, once you go ahead and apply it, you don't have to wait 5 minutes before squishing them together, and it can come in contact with oil pretty much right after installation, whereas the other stuff you have to wait 24 hours, and I might want to drive my car tonight, so we're going to go ahead and use this stuff. So on a K-series motor, you're going to apply it in this location on both sides, as well as over here. There's a little ridge for your cam sensors. You're going to want to apply it at that seam there. Basically, a rule of thumb, you want to put a very little bit wherever there is a seam. So there is all the gasket maker I added. You don't want too much, or else when you squish it together with the valve cover, it could go into the internals of your motor. So I went ahead and did that on both locations. Now we're good to put the valve cover back on the car. Sorry about the AC line, it's kind of in the way, but you'll still get the idea. Just a little FYI, I will be deleting my AC before the turbo install, so if you want to see a video on that, let me know down in the comments below. So I'm going to go ahead, and just like when I removed it, I'm going to try and place it down as square as possible to prevent any dirt from getting inside my engine. So making sure everything is out of the way, just go ahead and place her down. Try and get her square to make sure all that gasket maker we added is doing its job, and I think that is it. So I like to press down in every corner in the middle to make sure she's seated properly. As you can tell, that's a lot shinier than it used to be. So now let's go ahead and add all of our grommets and bolts. Time to add our grommets and washers, my bad. Before adding any of the nuts, I'm going to make sure they all fit to make sure the valve cover is seated correctly. These ones look very nice to go with my freshly cleaned valve cover. I decided not to paint it for a ease of the job, make sure the job went by nice and quickly, and also because sometimes a nice clean valve cover actually looks pretty nice unpainted. So yeah, I won't be painting it today, but if you wanted to paint it, that would have been a perfect time to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and put all the bolts on, the nuts on top of these studs here. You want to torque them down in a crisscross sequence just to make sure this side's not tight, and then when you tighten down this side, this guy over here breaks. Go ahead and put all of the coil packs back in, followed by the spark plug cover. And torque wise for your main bolts, just go hand tight without using a breaker bar. They're probably not even 10 foot-pounds torque rating. So let's go ahead and put it all back together, then we'll test her out. There it is, fully installed. It looks a lot cleaner than before, and of course will work a lot better. So the last thing to do is top up your oil. Of course, use the one that's recommended on your oil cap. Unless you're modified, then you know what to do. Basically, even if you don't think you lost much, it's always better to make sure than to accidentally blow up your motor. I was okay, I double checked, and my oil level is still good. So I won't be adding any of this right now, so I'm going to go ahead and put it back in the trunk of my car, as I always like to carry oil with me just in case something like this were to happen while driving. Let's go ahead and start her up and make sure there's no oil or crankcase pressure spurting out any of the gaskets. Alright, so my engine's on. I'm basically just looking at all of the gaskets to make sure there's no oil vapor coming out of them. It looks to be great. I won't know if I fix the problem until it heats up really, because that's when the oil would fall onto your exhaust or even your hot block. But I think that was a successful job. So there is how you can easily and relatively cheaply fix any hot oil smell with your Honda or any car for that matter. If you found this tutorial helpful, please be sure to like the video and subscribe for more future videos. And if you want to see this thing turbocharged in a few weeks. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like, comment, and subscribe.